What if the most revealing story in the entire NFL right now has nothing to do with a blockbuster trade, nothing to do with a record-breaking contract extension, or a splashy free agency signing that sent the internet into a frenzy? What if the most important thing happening in professional football right now is unfolding quietly in Cleveland, Ohio, centered on a young quarterback, two head coaches, and a contrast so stark that once you see it clearly, it changes the way you look at everything that happened last season? Because that is exactly what is going on, and the NFL Combine just pulled the curtain all the way back. The receipts are out. The comparison has been laid bare for every fan, every analyst, and every scout in the country to examine. We are talking about Shedeur Sanders. We are talking about the Cleveland Browns. And we are talking about the almost unbelievable difference between how Kevin Stefanski and Todd Monken have treated this young man. When you hear it broken down piece by piece, when you really sit with the comparison and let it land, it is going to change the way you understand everything that happened in Cleveland last year. And more importantly, it is going to show you exactly why what's being built there right now has the potential to be something genuinely special. Lock in, because we are going deep on this one. Start with the context, because context here isn't just important, it's everything. When Shedeur Sanders arrived in Cleveland, the football world had opinions, loud ones. Some people believed he was a steal falling to the 5th round. Some questioned the fit. Some wondered whether his college production at Colorado would translate to the professional level. But what almost nobody predicted, what nobody could have fully anticipated, was that the single biggest obstacle to his development as a professional quarterback wouldn't be opposing defenses. It wouldn't be the complexity of an NFL playbook. It wouldn't even be the weight of expectations that comes with being one of the most discussed prospects in recent draft history. The biggest obstacle would be his own head coach. That sounds harsh. It sounds like it might be fan frustration dressed up as analysis. But here's the thing about statements that sound harsh. Sometimes they're simply accurate. Kevin Stefanski, the man whose job it was to create an environment where Shedeur Sanders could grow and reach his potential, could barely bring himself to say the kid's name in public. And before anyone treats that as tabloid noise, understand that this is not based on feelings. It is based on documented, recorded, on-camera evidence that anyone with an internet connection can go back and watch for themselves. When reporters asked Stefanski about Shedeur specifically and directly, by name, with pointed questions that deserved real answers, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns responded the way a politician responds when someone asks about something he's hoping will quietly disappear. He talked in circles. He used language so carefully constructed and so deliberately vague that it communicated almost nothing of substance. He talked about player development in broad, generic terms. He talked about the team needing improvement at every position. He talked about thinking carefully about decisions involving young players. He said everything except the thing a young quarterback actually needs to hear from his head coach. He never said in plain terms that he believed in Shedeur Sanders. He never said with conviction that this young man had what it took to be the quarterback of this franchise. He never gave Shedeur the kind of public validation that every player deserves from the person leading his organization. And what makes that omission so significant is what was happening on the field at the same time. Because while Stefanski was crafting non-answers and dodging questions, Shedeur Sanders was actually going out there and making plays. The back half of that season told a story that no amount of coaching evasiveness could completely bury. Shedeur was winning games. He was flashing the kind of brilliance that made evaluators sit up straighter. He was showing the poise, the precision, and the competitive fire that people who believed in him coming out of Colorado had been promising was there all along. And yet the head coach watched all of that unfold and still could not bring himself to plant a flag in the ground and say publicly, clearly, and without qualification, "This is my quarterback." Think about what that environment does to a young player. Think about what it communicates, not just to Shedeur himself, but to every other player in that locker room watching how their head coach handles their starting quarterback. The message is corrosive in ways that go beyond the obvious. It creates doubt where there should be confidence. It creates distance where there should be unity. It tells the entire room that the coach himself is not fully invested in the direction this team is supposed to be heading. And it puts an unfair and unnecessary burden on a rookie quarterback who is already dealing with everything that comes with transitioning from college football to the most competitive professional league on the planet. There was a specific moment that crystallized everything wrong with how the situation was being handled. Reporters pushed hard and asked directly why Stefanski wouldn't simply put Shedeur in and see what the young quarterback could do with an offense that was clearly struggling. It was a fair question. It was the question every Cleveland fan watching from home was screaming at their television. And Stefanski's response was to pivot, to deflect, to bury the answer in so many qualifiers that, by the time he finished speaking, nobody in that press room was any clearer on where Shedeur stood. That kind of evasiveness is not a neutral act. People treat it like a personality quirk or a coaching preference. It is not neutral. When a head coach refuses to publicly back a player, the silence itself becomes a statement. The locker room hears it. The front office hears it. The rest of the league hears it. Other teams, other coaches, other players, they are all paying attention to how a head coach talks about his quarterback. And when the answer to every Shedeur Sanders question was essentially nothing, that nothing spoke volumes. It created a narrative around Shedeur that wasn't entirely fair and wasn't entirely earned. A narrative that said, even if nobody stated it directly, that the Cleveland Browns were not truly sold on this kid, that the organization was hedging, that the head coach had doubts he wasn't willing to voice publicly, but was making completely clear through everything else. Once that narrative takes root, once it starts circulating through the league's information networks, it becomes harder and harder for a young quarterback to shake regardless of what he does on the field. But here is where the story takes its most important turn. Kevin Stefanski is no longer the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And the man who replaced him is doing everything differently. Completely, unmistakably, almost shockingly differently. Todd Monken became the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And from the very first moment he stepped behind a microphone at the NFL Combine, it was obvious to anyone paying attention that the culture in Cleveland had undergone a fundamental transformation. Not a surface-level rebrand, not a carefully managed PR pivot designed to generate good press heading into a new season. A genuine, substantive, from-the-ground-up change in how the people leading this franchise think about and communicate their quarterback situation. When reporters came at Monken with questions about Shedeur Sanders at the Combine, and they came at him hard, with the kind of pointed, aggressive questioning designed to create controversy or force a head coach to either get defensive or throw his players under the bus, Monken did not flinch. He did not blink. He did not dance around anything. He sat there cool and composed and talked about Shedeur Sanders the way a head coach is supposed to talk about his quarterback. With honesty, with enthusiasm, with the kind of genuine, unperformed confidence in the young man that makes everyone listening feel like they are watching a real relationship being built rather than a carefully managed media narrative being managed. He acknowledged the entire backstory up front. He acknowledged the reports that Shedeur had not initially wanted to come to Cleveland when he was drafted. He acknowledged the questions and the drama that surrounded the arrival and the rocky first season. He addressed all of it without getting defensive, without deflecting, and without pretending any of it didn't happen. He owned the reality of the situation, and then he immediately pivoted to the future, which is exactly what strong leaders do. They don't hide from complicated histories. They acknowledge them and then move forward with clarity and purpose. The contrast between watching Monken speak about Shedeur and watching Stefanski speak about Shedeur is so stark, so undeniable, that it almost feels like watching footage from two completely different organizations rather than the same franchise separated by a single offseason. The body language is different. The word choices are different. The energy in the room is different. When Stefanski talked about Shedeur, or more accurately, when Stefanski did everything in his power to avoid talking about Shedeur, the atmosphere felt tense, guarded, and uncomfortable. When Monken talks about Shedeur, the atmosphere feels energized, open, and genuinely optimistic. And that difference matters enormously, because the way a head coach talks about his quarterback in public is a direct window into the culture he is building behind closed doors. But then Monken told a story that stopped people cold. Here is the moment that had Browns fans rewinding clips, sharing screenshots, and flooding social media with reactions. When Todd Monken was discussing his relationship with Shedeur Sanders at the Combine, he shared a story so specific, so personal, and so revealing that it painted a clearer picture of where this relationship stands than any amount of coaching speak ever could. Monken revealed that since taking the head coaching job in Cleveland, he has already spoken with Shedeur 3 separate times. 3 conversations, 3 phone calls or meetings before a single practice has been held, before a single snap has been taken, before the pads have even gone on. That alone tells you something important. Shedeur Sanders is not a passive participant in whatever is being built in Cleveland. He is actively engaged. He is picking up the phone. He is initiating contact. He is doing the relationship-building work that the best quarterbacks in this league understand is just as important as the physical work they do on the practice field. But then Monken went further. He told the story about his birthday on February 5th. He said a package arrived unexpectedly. His first assumption was that it had come from his wife. He opened it. Inside was a porcelain horse head, not from his wife, from Shedeur Sanders. The young quarterback, completely unprompted, had tracked down his new head coach's birthday and sent him a gift. Not a generic gift. A specific, thoughtful, personality-driven gift that showed Shedeur had actually been paying attention to the kind of person Todd Monken is. Monken reached out to ask about the meaning. Shedeur told him he simply really liked it and had gotten one for himself too. Monken laughed telling the story, made the inevitable Godfather jokes about bloody horse heads in beds, and then said he placed it right in his office, positioned directly between all the Cleveland helmets, so that Shedeur will see it the moment he walks in for his visit. Now, some people will hear that story and think it's just a fun anecdote, a light-hearted detail in an otherwise serious football conversation. But that reading misses everything that actually matters about it. The birthday gift is not just a birthday gift. It is a signal, a declaration of intent from a young quarterback who understands that winning a starting job in the NFL is not purely about what happens between the white lines. It's about relationships. It's about trust. It's about making the people in your building feel like you are genuinely invested in them and in the thing you are building together. Shedeur Sanders sent that gift because he wanted Todd Monken to know, in a way that no press conference statement could communicate, that he is bought in, that he respects this man, that he wants to build something real with this head coach, that the fractured, uncomfortable dynamic of his rookie year is not the story he is interested in repeating. And the fact that Monken shared that story publicly, with obvious warmth and genuine amusement, tells you the feeling is entirely mutual. 3 phone calls before training camp. A porcelain horse head sitting in the coach's office between the helmets waiting for the day the quarterback walks through the door. That is what a functional quarterback-coach relationship looks like in the NFL. And Cleveland hasn't had one in a long time. While Monken was making headlines with his candid combined comments, General Manager Andrew Barry was also speaking, and the language he used deserves careful examination. General managers in the NFL are masters of corporate speak. They are trained to say very little while appearing to say a great deal. They speak in carefully calibrated sentences designed to neither confirm nor deny, neither commit nor alienate. Saying the wrong thing too confidently costs them options. Saying too little makes them look disengaged. The balance is delicate, and most of them walk it with practiced precision. So when Andrew Barry stepped in front of reporters and spoke about Shedeur Sanders with the kind of specific, enthusiastic directness that he brought to those combined sessions, that was not an accident. That was not a slip of the tongue. That was a deliberate signal about how this organization views its quarterback situation and where its priorities actually lie. He talked about the positive things Shedeur did as a rookie. He acknowledged the typical growing pains that come with being a first-year starter in the most demanding professional sports league in the world. And he expressed real, tangible excitement about watching this young man grow and develop moving forward. Not the carefully hedged language you use when you're slowly distancing yourself from a player you're planning to move on from. The language of genuine organizational belief. Barry also confirmed that he and Monken have been spending significant time together, evaluating all three quarterbacks currently in the building: Shedeur Sanders, Dillon Gabriel, and Deshaun Watson. He was honest enough to acknowledge that the veteran quarterback market and the upcoming draft class are both factors being considered as the organization shapes its roster. He admitted openly that nobody has a crystal ball about exactly what the room will look like when the pads go on, and the real evaluation begins. But the critical thing about how Barry is communicating is not the specific details. It's the spirit behind them. He is not running from the Shedeur Sanders conversation. He is not burying the young quarterback in qualifiers or treating him like a depth chart footnote. He is engaging with the situation openly and honestly, which is what an organization does when it genuinely believes a player is part of its future. The Browns brass appears to view this competition not as a problem to be managed, but as a genuine opportunity. A chance to see what they really have in Shedeur Sanders when he is placed in an environment that actually supports his development rather than quietly undermining it. That shift alone, from managing perception to genuinely evaluating talent, is monumental. But there is a conversation that cannot be avoided in any honest discussion of this situation, and it involves the other veteran quarterback competing for this job. The Deshaun Watson reality check is not comfortable to deliver, but intellectual honesty demands it. In the last 5 years, Deshaun Watson has appeared in 19 games. 19. Not 19 games in one difficult season. Not 19 games because of a single devastating injury he is now fully recovered from. 19 games spread across 5 full years of professional football. That is not bad luck. That is not a rough stretch of health that could happen to anyone. That is a fundamental, sustained absence from competitive football that creates a specific and serious set of problems for any quarterback trying to return to starting-level play. Football is not a sport where you can step away for extended periods and simply return to your previous level through willpower and muscle memory. The game is too fast. The mental processing required to operate an NFL offense at a high level is too complex and too specific. The timing relationships between a quarterback and his receivers, the feel for the pocket, the ability to process multiple defensive looks simultaneously and make the right decision in fractions of a second. None of that can be maintained through training room work and film study alone. It requires real reps at full speed with real consequences. Watson has not been getting those reps consistently for the better part of half a decade. That is not opinion. That is the cold, documented, inescapable reality of what these last 5 years have looked like. The suspension, the return, the inability to stay healthy. And now heading into 2026, he is trying to compete for a starting job against a young, healthy, motivated quarterback who has been playing football at a high level consistently throughout that same period. A reporter covering this situation made the point with surgical precision. When you are evaluating a quarterback competition, and one side has appeared in 19 games over 5 years, and the other side has been playing consistently season after season. You take the consistent player every single time. It does not matter how much talent the other guy had at his peak. Peak performance from 3 years ago does not win games in 2026. This is not about dismissing Watson as an athlete or as a person. When Watson was operating at his best, he was genuinely one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league. There was a stretch where he looked like a generational talent at the position. But that version of Watson does not exist on the current Cleveland Browns roster. What exists is a quarterback who has played 19 games in 5 years, trying to come back against a younger competitor, who has been playing without interruption throughout that same period. Shedeur Sanders enters this competition as the clear favorite when you account for all the relevant factors honestly. But the Watson conversation is not purely a football conversation. It is also a financial one, and the financial dimension might actually be the most important part. The Watson contract situation has become one of the most discussed and most cautionary financial stories in recent professional football history. The numbers are staggering. The cap implications are severe and immediate. Every dollar committed to Watson is a dollar that cannot go toward the offensive linemen, the receiver weapons, the defensive playmakers this team needs to compete in the AFC North. Every dollar tied up in a quarterback who cannot stay on the field is a dollar effectively removed from Todd Monken's ability to build a competitive roster around him. This is the context in which Shedeur Sanders' development takes on an importance that goes far beyond just winning a quarterback competition. If Shedeur develops into a legitimate starting caliber quarterback, and the evidence from the back half of last season suggests the tools are genuinely there, then the Cleveland Browns suddenly possess something most organizations would trade almost anything to have: a young, motivated, talented quarterback on a rookie contract generating production at an affordable price. That is the single most valuable commodity in professional football, bar none. That financial reality is not separate from the football evaluation. It is central to it. When Monken talks about viewing this team as a retool rather than a rebuild, when he points to the back half of last season and sees a team that nearly beat the Bills at home, beat the Steelers, and went on the road and beat the Bengals, the math only works one way. It only works if the quarterback situation resolves in a cost-efficient direction. You cannot retool a team that is carrying enormous cap weight at the position. You cannot be aggressive addressing roster needs when the most expensive player on the roster is a question mark. But if Shedeur wins the job and performs, the entire financial equation shifts. Resources get freed. Options open. The retool becomes genuinely possible rather than aspirational. A reporter made this point in terms that cut through any remaining sentimentality. Even if you have never been a Shedeur fan, even if you have never believed in him and have no emotional investment in his success whatsoever. From a cold, purely business-oriented perspective, from the perspective of someone who only cares about building a winning football team, having a capable young quarterback performing at a high level on a rookie contract is exactly what the Cleveland Browns need right now to have any realistic chance of digging out from under the Watson situation and building something sustainable. Shedeur Sanders is not just competing for a starting job. He is competing for the right to be the financial cornerstone around which an entirely new version of the Cleveland Browns gets constructed. To fully understand why Shedeur is built for this moment, why this competition, this pressure, this spotlight is not going to break him, you have to understand where he came from. Shedeur Sanders did not develop in a normal football environment. He grew up playing for his father, Deion Sanders, one of the most famous and most scrutinized figures in the history of American sports. First at Jackson State, where Deion brought immediate national media attention to a program that had never experienced anything like it. Then at Colorado, where Deion arrived with a full media circus and immediately transformed a struggling program into one of the most watched teams in the country. Playing in that environment means something specific. It means cameras everywhere, microphones everywhere, national media attention on every game, every practice, every decision. And alongside the attention came the constant, persistent, uncomfortable questions about nepotism, about whether Shedeur deserved his spot, about whether his numbers were real or simply the product of a system designed to make him look good. Those questions follow a player. They create a specific kind of psychological pressure that most quarterbacks never have to deal with. Most develop in relative obscurity, building their game and their confidence without simultaneously having to defend their legitimacy to a skeptical public. Shedeur had to do both at the same time. He had to play quarterback at a high level and prove over and over again that he deserved to be there at all. He navigated it. He didn't just survive it. He thrived in it. He developed into a legitimate NFL prospect not despite the fishbowl environment, but in many ways because of it. When you spend your formative years dealing with that level of scrutiny and doubt from outside, you develop a psychological toughness that cannot be manufactured in a comfortable, low-pressure setting. You either crack under the weight or you come out the other side harder, more focused, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Then the draft. The pre-draft process brought its own particular difficulty. His stock fluctuated wildly. His character was questioned in ways that went well beyond standard football evaluation. And Shedeur had to sit through a process where his entire life was being examined under a microscope, while teams and analysts and media personalities debated publicly whether he was worth the investment. Then he landed in Cleveland in a situation that was clearly not his first choice. Spent his rookie season dealing with a head coach who seemed determined to treat him as a problem to be managed rather than a talent to be developed. At every step of this journey, Shedeur Sanders has encountered resistance. He has encountered doubt. He has encountered environments not designed to bring out his best. And at every single step, he has responded by playing football, by competing, by refusing to let the circumstances become an excuse. That is the defining characteristic of quarterbacks who go on to have long, impactful careers in this league. Todd Monken did not come to Cleveland to oversee a rebuild. He came to win, and the distinction is not semantic. It reflects a genuine philosophical position backed by a specific analysis of what he saw when he evaluated this roster before taking the job. When Monken looked at the back half of last season, he did not see a broken team. He saw a team that nearly beat the Buffalo Bills at home, a team that beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that went on the road and beat the Cincinnati Bengals. He looked at those results and said, if those same performances happen in the first 3 weeks of the 2026 season, this team is 2-1 and in position to compete for everything. That is not blind optimism. That is the honest assessment of a veteran football mind who has looked carefully at the available evidence and concluded that this organization is closer than the outside world currently believes. But his retool vision has one critical dependency at its center. Everything he's describing, the rapid competitiveness, the ability to win in the AFC North without going through a years-long rebuild, all of it depends on solving the quarterback situation in a way that is both effective and financially sustainable. It depends on having a young quarterback who can take the reins of this offense and operate at a high enough level to make the team competitive right now. Shedeur Sanders is that solution if he develops the way his supporters believe he will. If he wins this competition and plays anything close to the way he played in the back half of last season, with the poise, the accuracy, and the competitive fire that made people take genuine notice, then Monken's vision becomes not just a vision but a realistic plan. Suddenly, you have a quarterback who can compete in the AFC North against Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and whoever Pittsburgh lines up at the position. Suddenly, you have resources freed up that were previously locked into the most expensive question mark in the league. Suddenly, The entire calculus of this organization shifts from survival mode into genuine competition mode. The stakes of this quarterback competition go far beyond who gets the starting nod in Week 1 of the 2026 season. They go to the heart of what the Cleveland Browns are going to be for the next decade. They go to the heart of whether Todd Monken gets the tools he needs to turn his vision into reality. And they go to the heart of whether one of the most resilient, most tested, and most psychologically prepared young quarterbacks in the game gets the opportunity he has spent his entire career earning. Step back and look at the full picture of what is happening in Cleveland right now. 12 months ago, Shedeur Sanders was in a building where his own head coach seemed reluctant to speak his name publicly, where the organizational energy around him felt uncertain, uncomfortable, and quietly undermining, where the narrative circulating around the league made it harder and harder for him to be evaluated fairly regardless of what he did on the field. Today, he has a head coach who told a national media audience about the birthday gift Shedeur sent him, who placed that gift in his office between the helmets, positioned so Shedeur will see it the moment he walks in, who has already had 3 conversations with him before a single practice has been held, who speaks about him with honesty and genuine enthusiasm rather than careful evasiveness. He has a general manager who is using the language of real organizational belief rather than the corporate speak of a front office quietly planning to move on. He has a team that has aggressively rebuilt the offensive line around him, not around a question mark, but around the player they believe is their answer. And he has a competition ahead of him that, when you account for all the relevant factors honestly, he enters as the clear favorite. The contrast between 12 months ago and today is almost difficult to believe, but it is real, and it is the result of an organization finally deciding to do what should have been done from the beginning: believe in a talented young quarterback out loud in public, without apology and without reservation. The stage is set. The relationship is being built. 3 phone calls and a porcelain horse head sitting between the helmets tell you more about where this is headed than any official statement ever could. When those pads go on and the competition begins in earnest, the entire football world is going to be watching. Not because it's just another roster battle, because it is the culmination of one of the most human, most compelling quarterback stories professional football has produced in years. A young man tested at every turn. A coach who walked in and immediately saw what the previous one could not or would not see. And an organization that finally appears to understand what every winning culture in this league eventually figures out. The most important thing you can do for a talented young quarterback is simply believe in him, out loud, in public, without apology. Cleveland is doing that now. And when it works, the signs have been there all along for anyone paying close enough attention to see them. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Does the contrast between how Stefanski and Monken have handled Shedeur Sanders change the way you look at last season? And is this the year Cleveland finally gets the clean evaluation that settles this debate for good? Every take is welcome down below.